being able to connect with enthusiastic leaders this morning. And so I'm really, really good to go now. So now I may crash and burn after this, but I'm good to go right now. I am so excited about this morning, first of all, because it's the first time I've presented this content. So that's always exciting and a little scary. About 10 years ago, I was working for the Teaching Trust. I think many of you might be familiar with the Teaching Trust, but I spent quite a bit of time studying and learning other systems, other business models to learn how good leaders make good decisions and how they lead change in a monumental way. So about 10 years ago, I went to a 5-day institute, and it was called Leadership Judgment. And so here's my binder from the Leadership Judgment program. It's a pretty thick binder. And it was sponsored by a gentleman by the name of Noel Tichy. And Noel Tichy is a professor at University of Michigan, and he has studied leadership across so many companies, 500 companies, just everything you can think of. And so what was exciting about this seminar was that it brought people together from all across the world, literally. There were Navy SEALs in my session. There were CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. There were educators, not many educators. And so I think 10 years ago is when I really got excited about leveraging other resources outside of education to be able to learn and influence my work in education. So I'm excited to share part of that work with you today. It was, again, 5 days. You're going to get a 2-hour crash course in it, but I hope it's something that you'll be able to leverage and be able to learn from as you continue in your leadership journey. So very excited to be able to share this with you all this morning. So as you know, this is actually part 2 of our 3-part series. Last session, we spent time on principles of change management. Today, we're going to talk about making judgment calls and its connection to personal leadership. And then our last session, which will be August 15th, is going to be, now that we know about change, we know about how to make good calls, how do we make sure the change sticks? And so that will be our learning in August. So we still have one more session to go. So I'm very excited about that. So just to kind of go over a few norms of our learning today, you guys, and this is not new for those of you who were here last time, they're the same norms. Basically want to make sure that it's a community dialogue, that you try to keep your audio on mute as much, if you can, just to make sure that we're all able to hear each other. If you do want to speak, I will try to see everybody's hand raised. So just, do your little thumb on the reaction. And if not, if you can't get my attention, go ahead and interject. And just try to keep your comments brief so that everyone has an opportunity to share. We'll have breakout sessions today, so you'll be able to get into smaller groups, which will allow more conversation and dialogue than even the larger group. And then, of course, use our chat box. Feel free to use our chat box, ask questions, amen things, or what have you. We'll try to get questions answered. And if not, you'll have an opportunity at the end of this session to complete a survey, and you can certainly ask any questions that maybe you didn't get a chance to answer or ask. And then if something pops up that you really don't want to speak with the whole group about, and you just want to ask me a personal question about a call, I'm happy to respond to that as well. So those are our rules of engagement today. We only have 2 hours, and I promise it's going to go really fast. I normally plan too much, but this time I think I did a little bit better. If not, you're still, of course, going to get the whole slide deck, and you'll get a copy of the webinar. So you'll be able to listen again if you may have missed something or want to go a little bit deeper. All right, so our learning outcomes for today, go ahead and close this little box. Our learning outcomes for today is we're going to delve into how to make appropriate leadership judgment calls. We're going to learn how to create storylines and how storylines influence decisions that we make as people and as leaders. And then we're going to make any personal connections to change initiatives and judgment. I ask you all to think about a couple of calls, a call that you made that you think was a good call and you made a good decision and it was well thought out, and maybe a call that you probably should have pressed pause on, or maybe wasn't as good of a call. And we're going to explore a couple of those options in your small groups. And we'll talk about other calls in our larger group. So lots of conversation today about judgment. So here are some resources for our learning. I already shared my binder that I really hadn't looked back in about 5 years. So it took me a little time to kind of go through and reorient myself to it. But Noel Tichy is the author of How Winning Leaders Make Great Calls. So much of our content today comes from that book. Switch, which we spoke about last time, which is around change management. Moral intelligence is really like, how are you as a leader, making moral and ethical decisions that are aligned with your values and your story. And then Harvard Business Review, because a couple of articles, I got some content from there as well. So of course, I'm going to ask you to share our learning. If you are a tweeter, I should say, feel free to tweet learning, screenshots, whatever you want to share, and use the hashtag leadership judgment. And then of course, FSLN, we are on Facebook as well. So let's spend just a few minutes kind of reorienting ourselves to our learning from our last session. So if anybody remembers anything from the last session about change that you want to share with the larger group, we'll listen for a couple of responses. Take a moment just to think about our last session, and if there's anything that you remember that you want to share with the larger group.
Well, I think that I'm Letitia Haynes with Transition Ed Coaching and Consulting, and my takeaway was the fact that there is a distinct difference between change and transformation, and that when we have those two, well, they work together, but when we have those two particular lenses that we can look through, that we can ensure that the transformation that we're trying to get to, that process, that it has its particular components in place to get to that particular change. And so just knowing and bringing that into perspective, that those are two distinctive actions that must take place to get to change, it changed my perspective on how to approach change.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Haynes. Who else wants to share something that resonated with you from our last session around change management?
Hi, I'm Dr. Miller from Plantation, Florida. And I think the thing that resonated with me the most was the transformational change model that we went through with all the different stages: resistance, confusion, release, etc. And what was profound for me is that you could be in any one of those phases, but when you sit down and analyze where things are, you're probably in one stage, but it probably negated you going to the other phase. I remember one of the panelists last time actually, was given an example, and you told her that, you probably thought you were in this phase, but you really didn't get out of this phase. So that resonated with me. And, I was thinking about it the whole time, because as you go through and do change, you think it's, one linear transition, but it's not. You go back and forth. And I think that's one thing as leaders we have to realize, that, change isn't linear. You go back and forth, all the time.
Very good. Thank you, Dr. Miller. Anybody else want to share one more comment?
Good morning, Dr. Brown. Good morning, everyone. I'll share. This is Rochelle Hester from Arlington ISD. One thing that stuck with me is declaring victory too soon. You must stay consistent and follow through the process. You can celebrate the small wins, but you got to continue with the process throughout.
Very good. Thank you. All those are great comments, and certainly all true to what we learned last week. So I'll just kind of highlight a couple additional things that we talked about. Is the importance of, when you're leading change, that you have to remove the ambiguity from the vision, so that everyone is clear. You'll need to understand how the decision is going to impact others, how you're going to script the moves to make sure that you translate what you hope to happen into actual actions. And until you kind of go to that process to change, to move from the idea to changing behaviors, you're not really ready for change unless you can translate that from an idea aspirationally into what behaviors you expect others to engage in course, as a result of your change. So this is what Dr. Miller was referencing, our transformational change model. Of course, these are the 5 stages. And of course, any one person could be in any one of these stages at any moment. So when leading change and even making decisions, I want you to keep this kind of in your back pocket, that people go through denial sometimes. They may resist the change effort. This may be true also when you're making a decision about something that may be controversial. People still may go through denial, resistance. They may be confused by the request, by what you're asking them to do. Eventually, you want them to get to release and then to enacting the new behavior that you want them to engage in, and then ultimately be committed to the cause, to the goals that you have. And that is a process. And again, people can be in varying components of this change model at any time. So it's very important that you're mindful of that as you're continuing the work. And it's hard work and it's exhausting, it's tiring, because here you are, you have this vision, you have this goal that you're trying to reach, and you have to take the time to stop and see where people are and help them move throughout the model. And that's where the real work and learning and effort really occurs. So, making good judgment calls, I mean, it's critical in any kind of leadership position. It's critical in any decision that you make in your personal life. And so basically, it's the most important role in an organization, is to make good decisions. So when there is a leader, and you can think about that leader who consistently makes good calls, and you think, how did she know that was the right thing to do? Or how did he know that was the right lever to pull? When you show good judgment, people remember the outcome, right? If you show poor judgment, nothing else matters. They remember that too. So we know it's impossible to always make the right call every single time, but good leaders, a high percentage of the time, make the right calls. And when it counts is when it's most critical. And we'll think about just the space we're in right now with COVID-19. Leaders across the world are having to make split-second decisions every single day about how we're going to try to contain this virus, this pandemic. And so good judgment, you can see good and poor judgment across the world right now, just looking at our COVID-19 responses and how your organization has responded to that. We're going to dig a little bit into the COVID-19 now, because not now, but a little bit later, because it's so relevant to what we're experiencing right now with judgment. So I shared with you a couple of articles. They were pretty brief. We're going to actually go into a breakout room, and I want you to, find your way to get to the article that is the Leadership Essentials: 5 Proven Ways to Make a Tough Call in Aviation. You may have read that and thought, did she mean education? Why did she give us an aviation article? And I told you, I like to leverage business resources. Because again, it's all transferable. And sometimes in education, we get so ingrained in our educational ease and jargon that we don't step out of that. So if you connect with me, we're going to always look at the business world, because it's as relevant and as applicable. So what we're going to do is we're going to break out into rooms, because the breakout feature is actually here, because I did a little bit more homework this time. And I want you just to kind of share in your smaller group. You'll be in probably groups of 4 or 5. What resonated with you from this article, any connections that you can make to your personal leadership experiences, or anything in your organization in terms of making calls. So I'm going to give you just a moment to kind of locate that article. And then we're going to actually have, I think we're going to have about 7 minutes for this particular breakout. And again, I'll give you a minute so you'll need a timekeeper. You'll get about a minute notice that we're going to be closing out. I just want you to have an in general conversation about this particular brief article, what resonated with you, and any specific connections you can make to your leadership experiences. Any questions about that? Okay, so we're going to go ahead. I'm going to get you started. You'll have 7 minutes to share in your smaller group, and we'll see you back here in 7 minutes.
I functioned as a person. I always tell me what the bad news is first, and then I can, fester with that as you tell me the good news. So it's just interesting to see that it actually is a part of a recommended leadership practice. Get to it, and then let's figure out a way, or I figure out a way to address that and help to support those that work with me. But as all of you all said, it's just a good source to look at each of these components individually, and then of course think of them collectively, and how that truly does help to build morale, trust within any organization, particularly schools.
Definitely agree.
Even like the coaching model, when you think about when you coach teachers, it's all about building that relationship and, getting that buy-in from teachers. So it's like, if you're not keeping these things in mind, how are you actually building a type of relationship with teachers so that they trust that you are truly in the, in this relationship with them to help them to, or, for you all to grow. And it's not like, oh, I'm here to get you. That even translates to that. Granted, a lot of coaches are viewed as leadership on the campus, but I do think that's even a part of things. Just
Okay, we have about 30 more seconds. Wait for the other folks to join us. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Would like to know if there are one or two of you who might want to share just maybe the thoughts of your group or something that resonated with you or connections that you made to leadership, to your leadership.
I'll go. This is Catherine Claiborne. I'm in Arlington ISD. And Lee Adams is also, she was in my breakout group. So if you want to chime in, we were kind of talking about this article from the lens of a new principal. One of the points that really resonated with me was don't look for validation, because when you're in the role of an assistant principal, it gets different than when you're in the role of a principal. And so I think as a new principal, the tendency to want to please everybody. I see Dr. Eaton nodding her head. So, you want everyone to be happy, you want everyone to feel good. And when I got to number 5, I was like, oh, okay. So as long as, and so what Lee pointed out is that as long as we are, and this is what Dr. Brown talks about all the time, is if we're connected to our values, if we're connected to that strong vision and mission, then sometimes the hard messages will still be received okay, and you don't have to water it down into something that it shouldn't be or that's not good for kids. And that's, it just, honestly, I think that as a principal, a new principal, you have to, there's a tug of war in your mind, like, I want to be liked, but I want to make sure I'm doing what's right.
Yeah, Dr. Brown, I'd like to piggyback off of Catherine. Our conversation for all 4 of us in our group were very similar, but I really integrated my conversation in this article with the book Switch First of all, thank you for introducing me to that book because it has been such a game changer for me, and especially at this point in my career. And it's just the aspect of the why and the clear and concise information and how all that alignment and connectedness is so important. So,
Very good. Thank you, Lee. Let's hear from one more.
I'd like to share. This is Ebony Key from Arlington ISD, and we touched on most of them, but when we got to the number 4, you owe it to them. Our group really looked at who the them was. So the them is outside of the teachers, but we owe it to our parents and our students to be transparent and have these conversations and kind of thinking about all of our stakeholders as we're communicating.
Very good. Thank you, Ebony. Thank you all for sharing your thoughts on that. All right, so we're going to just keep moving along that line. It'll lead us right into the next part of our conversation. So I want you thinking about a call that you made. I asked you to kind of start thinking about that before our session today. What was a judgment call that you made? What were some things that you considered when you determined that was the call that you were going to make? And then if you were to rate that call on a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being well executed, what was the score that you would give your call, and talk to us about why? So I'll give y'all about 60 seconds or so just to kind of recall that. And we'll hear from 2 or 3 of you who want to share with a larger group. So take a minute or so to think about that. Okay, let's see, who's the brave person who wants to share? Could be a good or a bad call, whichever one you want to share with us. Let's talk about it.
So my name is Johanna Alquini. I'm a Fort Worth ISD. I'm a department chair, and I'm also an AP intern. And one call I had to make in my department, as a department, we all came to a conclusion that we would do an integration of technology in our instruction. And one of the teachers did not really want to switch from his old ways. And so, because he was stuck to his usual style of instruction and lecturing the kids, he did not want to integrate technology. And we had a close call together to tell him, okay, why this is the vision of the department, and this is the vision of the school, this is the vision of the district. Our motto is singleness of purpose. What is your purpose for being in the classroom? Why can you not integrate technology? Is it that you do not understand how to, so you can get the needed help, or you just do not want to do it? And so after our conversation, I figured his passion for the kids was great, but he just did not want to change or transform his teaching style. And so when we at the end of our conversation, I suggested to him, not really suggesting, I brought it out to him, okay, what would you like to do? Because we need to serve our students better. So we put the options on the table, and he told me he had a different certification that could serve the kids in a way he knew how to better. And so he was moved from the language department to the art department. And so we're able to make that change without bias. And he bought into the idea that he could not fulfill the vision and the goal of the department. And he, without any hitch, he was able to move on. So I was able to tell him, this is the goal. For you to remain here, this is what we have to do. And he agreed on it and said he would like to serve the kids better. And we took him to where his strength was.
And so how would you rate that call? 5 being well executed, just what you know about making good judgment calls now.
I know we owe it to the kids. And so we're not about, like in my room, we talked about my part was not looking out for validation. We want to be liked. We want to make sure that everyone is okay, but we need to be assertive. That is very important. As much as we are empathetic, we need to be assertive, because that's the only way we can serve not only the students, but also the community at large, the stakeholders.
Mm-hmm. So give me a number.
From 1 to 5, I would say 4.
Okay, good. So the call you made as a department, or you and as a department, was to allow this teacher to serve in a different capacity in the school. That's going to be more, that the kids will be more successful, he'll be more successful, right? So some things that you considered when you made that call, you considered, of course, certification. You considered his passion for the new subject, and he already had a passion for the kids. You considered that, and you considered the goals of the school and what you've had established. And so those are a few things that I captured that you said you used, and that sounded like a pretty good call. Is he still in that role and being successful? Just curious.
He was successful for a year, but some other things happened.
Well, there you go. Look, you can't save them all sometimes, right? Thank you. It's Johanna. Yeah. Johanna, right?
Johanna, yes.
Johanna. Okay, very good. Thank you for sharing. Can I get one more person to share an examination of their call?
Dr. Brown, I'll share. Can y'all hear me?
Yes. Who's speaking?
This is Marcy Thomas.
Hi, Marcy. Go ahead.
Hello. I just want to say, so it started from the fact that I do have a personal issue with liking to take on the role I can control more, because I know if I do it, it gets done. But what happens when you start putting yourself in that category, you tend to take on too much. And the whole purpose of a team or a collaborative group is to, deviate, and everybody uses their strength. And so after our first session, I actually went back to my group and I made a call. I decided to say that everyone would divide the task that I were taking on. We would divide it evenly. I had some resiliency. Everybody felt like I was already doing it good. Why would we do it? Change it now. But in the midst of, I said, if it doesn't work, we can always go back to what was already in place. But let's just try it, because I feel like this would bring more people, basically through the process, it would get everybody up the ladder. And so when I made that call and made everybody start doing those parts, everyone started in tune. Everybody took the task. They didn't want to fail. They wanted to live up to those expectations. And so I would rate my call of changing the process of how things were being done at a 5, because I could see the growth in everyone. And I realized I didn't have to take on everything, but people get comfortable sometimes when you do it.
That's true. And we do too. We get comfortable in our role as, okay, I can execute well. I know how it's going to look, so I'll just go ahead and handle it. Great. Thank y'all for sharing those. And we're going to dig a little bit deeper into making good judgment calls and see if maybe your ratings might change, considering the process that I'm going to share with you a little bit throughout our presentation. So thank y'all for sharing that. All right. So the thing about judgment, you guys, is that over the course of our lives, we make thousands and thousands and thousands of judgment calls. Some of those are very trivial, like what we're going to have for dinner, what we're going to buy at the grocery store. Those things are not monumental. But then sometimes you do make those judgment calls about who you're going to marry and what career you're going to take up. And those are monumental. And the reality is that our ability to make the right calls as leaders is super, super paramount. And the reason why is because when we make a judgment call, it impacts others exponentially. It influences their lives. It can influence their careers, their trajectory. And so in the end, the judgment calls that we make can really significantly contribute to if our organization, our department, our business, our district is a success, or if it is, of course, a failure. So something for us to consider. And sometimes we make calls so often that we don't even stop to think, how many decisions and calls are we making every single day that not only impact us, but impact so many people around us? And so what Noel Tichy talks about with judgment is that judgment doesn't just occur at a single moment, but it grows out of a process. And so those who regularly make good judgment calls, they're not just having a lot of good luck or just, being lucky or having these aha moments. They are prepared. They know how to make the right call. They know how to execute it with conviction, with skill, and with confidence. So Tichy talks about 4 different types of knowledge that is required for good judgment. And the first one is self-knowledge. So I really talk a lot about personal leadership, the importance of knowing yourself, the importance of knowing your strengths, your values, your areas of opportunity. That's important for you to know. Also, knowing stuff when you're making good judgment calls. The social network refers to basically the people that you are around, those who you supervise, those who you lead, those who you support. How well do you know them to know how to make the right call and its impact on them? I think of Johanna's example in Fort Worth. She talked about that team, that department. I mean, they had collective goals. She knew pretty much the people in her department, what resonated with them, what was going to motivate them, what was going to work for students. So it was important that she knew them well to know how they may be impacted, or even that one member, by the change in assignment for that teacher. Another type of knowledge that's important for good judgment is organizational knowledge. I think about, as a new principal, when I've gone into new schools, or even when I came to Arlington, a brand new district, I had to have organizational knowledge. I didn't know a lot about Arlington when I came. Not much at all. Arlington was pretty quiet. We're trying to change that and get us out there a little bit more. But knowing about your organization, historically, what's worked for them, culturally, how they operate, is very important when you make those calls, because you can make the wrong call by being misinformed about the organization. Many new leaders make the mistake of going into a new position or a new school, for example, as a principal, and they lack the organizational knowledge of that particular institution, and it stops them from making the right calls, or the calls aren't executed as well. The last type of knowledge that Noel Tichy says is important for good judgment is contextual knowledge. It's also connected to the organization. I'll go back to Johanna's example. We'll just continue to unpack that one. And contextually, it was important that team understood how the impact of that decision was going to influence the department. What's the context of the team, the dynamics, the context of the school, and how they may respond to someone who thought was doing a good job in a role, and others may have thought that as well. How would they respond to, a movement of a key member of the team? So again, we don't make decisions in isolation. We don't make calls without thinking of all of these different components, because they're all relevant and very important to making that decision. Any questions or thoughts on this particular component, the types of knowledge required for good judgment? Questions, thoughts? I don't have a moderator today, so I'm trying to manage it all today. Questions or thoughts? Anybody have a connection that they want to share about a call that was made, and maybe where you may have lacked some of this information that may have contributed to a call not being as successful as you would have liked?
Dr. Brown, I'll chime in on this one. This is Takesha Wynn with Idea Public Schools. I would say I made a call. I think my self-knowledge, social network was there, but thinking about like organizational knowledge was not. And so, like, long story short, in my previous district, I was over a new teacher support, and I ordered a ton of resources, right? And just based on some of the commentary and some of the survey data I had, directed the call in books that I ordered. And so one of the books I ordered was from, God, I can't think of his name at the moment, but the name of the book is For White Folks Who Teach in the Hood and the Rest of Y'all Too, right? And really powerful book, right? But everybody wasn't ready, right? So I did not have all of the various like dynamics of different areas of the district that may not have needed that book, or were not really ready to confront like that type of subject. So just gathering that really made my call probably like a 2, but all the other books were successful, right? But that one got a lot of pushback and flack.
That's a great example. So it's like in that one, you not only wanted to have more organizational knowledge, but contextual knowledge of how this type of content might impact others in that department or organization, or even the new teachers and how they may respond to that. Good. Yeah, I think this is so important. And I didn't, we make calls all the time, you guys, who's going into a lot of detail about all these components. I mean, I certainly wasn't. And it wasn't until I learned more that I feel like I've been able to make better calls. I still mess up, but I think I make more informed calls now, just knowing that there are different components I need to really delve into before I just make a call. Sometimes you have to make a knee-jerk call in a crisis. And we're going to talk about how that looks and how others in other industries do that routinely, where we may think it's a crisis, but it's really not a crisis to them because it's what they do on a regular basis and they're prepared for that. Thank you for sharing, Dr. Nguyen. So this is an example. You have an emergency room. So you have a helicopter that comes in, their whole family was in a car wreck, and it may look like a crisis on the outside. People are rushing around, it's fast paced, the family's in crisis, but the staff, it's just another day at work. This may be like so chaotic and so, something we've never can imagine happening, but for them, like it's what they do. So in those quiet moments when the ER is not full of, patients and people on needing ventilators, like we're seeing right now, they use those quiet moments to prepare. They scout how many free beds they have. They look to make sure they have the IVs and other equipments and ventilators ready and prepared on a dime to be able to help make sure that people are able to live. They're constantly sensing what the next urgent matter might be. They're framing how their response is going to be. And with enough experience in doing that every single day, day in and day out, those crisis judgment calls can be handled routinely. I think about schools because, almost all my career has been in a school setting and as a principal and district leader. And we've had many crisis calls that we've had to make over the course, for me, it's almost 25 years. I'm old. I'm going to start saying 20 plus years. That makes me sound like I'm a little bit, not as old. Yeah, I'm going to start saying my 20 plus years of education. So my 20 plus years of education, I can say there have been so many times where crisis calls have had to been made. And I don't know how prepared I was or members of the team may have been because we may not have ever faced that before. But what I'll share with you, the routine and process that we're going to learn today is going to help you be able to make a call no matter if it's a crisis, no matter if it's moving, no matter if it's about the book you're going to purchase for staff, if it's about moving a team member to a different part of the organization, you're going to have the same process that you use no matter what to be able to make sure those calls are the right ones. So how do people know how to make the right calls? How do you know how to do that? So one way that Tichy and company talks about the importance of knowing how to make the right call is developing a storyline. How do you develop a storyline that will basically be your central way of knowing how to make a good decision? So your storyline, and we're going to actually unpack this with wherever you work now, whether you're a consultant, your department, your district, your organization, we're going to unpack this a little bit right now. So your storyline helps you make calls in a couple of ways. One, it allows you to understand what is the direction I want my organization to go? What's the idea that makes us who we are as a department, as a school, as a business, as an organization? What's the idea that's going to help us be successful? And then your values, of course, we know that word, but when you talk about your storyline, it's how are those values articulated to where everybody understand what we think we hold to be true about who we are. And the third one is, what strategy would we use as an organization that would generate the energy that we need to accomplish our goals? Okay, so your storyline is the idea, what's our identity? What are we about? The values that we hold to be true, and then what strategy are we going to use to motivate people, get the energy around this goal? That creates a storyline. Okay, let's unpack this some more. So let's talk about this organization that I founded 4 years ago, Future School Leaders Network. So the idea that I had was to make FSLN successful by creating opportunities for leaders to network, to grow professionally, personally also, and to be able to launch into their next career move if that's what they choose, right? So what values do we hold to be true in FSLN? One is we believe that if you focus on personal leadership, that then you can effectively lead and create equitable outcomes for all students in education. Now, what energy, what strategy would we use to be able to get this idea accomplished, right? Galvanize enthusiastic leaders who have a growth mindset to strengthen the face of education, no matter the role that you're in. So every judgment call I make for FSLN should be grounded in these three components. I just had an email yesterday from actually an author who wants to connect with FSLN, basically wants us to help him reach out to teachers and to train teachers and to serve teachers in various capacities. So I had to think about, before I make the call to say, yes, we will partner with your organization to reach out to teachers in a broader form, I had to think about, our idea is connecting, is opportunities to network, to grow. We believe that if people focus on their personal leadership, we can create equitable outcomes for kids. We really want people who have a growth mindset to strengthen the face of education. And if all of these three components are going to be lived through this partnership, I could make the call and say, this might be something we can explore. If there was any part of his organization that was not aligned with ours, our values, for example, if they didn't talk about equity for all students, that may not be a decision that we'd make as an organization because it's not aligned with our values. So as you think about judgment calls that you make for your organization, your department, your business, you're going to start thinking about what is our idea, what are our values, and how are we going to motivate people to get our goals accomplished. Any questions or thoughts about that storyline process?
I have a question, Dr. Brown. So the storyline basically is your overarching purpose for the work that you do, or do you create a storyline every time you're faced with a decision?
Oh, that's a good question. Who was speaking just now?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's Dr. Miller down in Plantation, Florida.
Okay.
I work in Broward County, and
Yes,
I'm an intern principal. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Miller. I'm sorry, I can't see everybody on screen, so to make sure we
Oh, got you.
Okay,
Okay,
so
no
actually, your storyline, you guys, it's your it undergirds everything that you do. You should have one storyline as an organization, and it should be well thought out, right? I kind of just did this last night within a few minutes. So ideally, I would want the board to come together for FSLN to help us create this, right? So it's something that you create as a group, as a team, as a leadership of an organization to say, who are we? That every decision that we make is going to be connected to our storyline. And if any part of that is not, we're probably going to have to pass on that. So it shouldn't be, and it doesn't mean your storyline can't change over time. You'll see with a couple of examples in our case studies that storylines change over time, but ideally it undergirds all of the work that you do. Any other questions or comments about this? All right. So storylines help leaders, as I shared. So it helps you by framing your choices. And if you don't use some kind of a storyline to make judgments, it really is meaningless. So if this is the purpose of who you are, your values you hold to be true, and you don't use those to make judgment calls, it's not really beneficial to your organization or to you, of course, as a leader. So when that need for a judgment arises, leaders can think about, okay, now I know what our storyline is. If we go with this decision, what are possible consequences that we might face? Using our storyline, that will give you a greater picture of what to do, a greater idea of what to do. So if I made the call to partner with this organization, I have to consider the impact on FSLN, the impact on our brand, the content that person is delivering. Is it powerful enough to align with the work that we're doing? It's going to give me a better idea of what to do. Sometimes you have a lot of time to make a judgment call, so you can really kind of take your time and go through that. Other times it might be split second, where that's why your values, your idea, and energy have to be so crystallized that you're able to still make a judgment call, right off the bat. I'll give you an example. We've not done a storyline for Arlington ISD. I can just talk to you about my personal department and just kind of the thoughts that I had. In the wake of COVID, we had all of our folks, just like you all probably, were working remote from home. In July, we had made a decision as a district that we were going to allow, we wanted our staff to come back to work, practice social distancing, principals, APs, I'm just speaking for the leadership side because that's the department that I run, to come back to the schools, to our department in the Office of School Leadership, and get back to work physically so we can kind of start getting ready to get back into school. I was given the opportunity, all the department leaders were, to say, hey, this is your department, so we want you to think about what you want. If you want your team to come back right away, if you want them to wait, that's going to be up to you. So I really had to think about, first, the idea was we want our schools to feel supported. We want leaders to feel like that we're keeping them safe. So that was an idea that was important for our department. The values, of course, is going to be safety, the personal well-being of our staff members, making sure that's intact. And the energy, it's important that they feel motivated enough to be able to come to work, to be able to execute the role, right? So, after a little consideration, I really thought, I just don't think I'm ready. The consequences of bringing people back into the office in July might be catastrophic. We don't know enough about the disease. We don't know if we're going to be coming back to school in August. Now we know we probably will be, but not, in person. And so I made the call to keep everybody at home. All the principals, all the APs, the deans, all the area superintendents, you work remotely. And if you want to come in, let's talk about that, because likely I'm going to ask you not to come in unless it's urgent. So that was something that was, it was a tough call to make. Not every department made that call, but I knew for my team, I wanted to make sure that the consequences that we may face would not backfire and would have a backlash for that. So that was a judgment call that was made pretty quick. And I still stand by that without even having gone through all of the ideas, values, and energy, still had an idea of the consequences of that kind of action. So let's spend some time now talking about this storyline. You're going to have a chance to kind of brainstorm your own here for your organization or department. So in 2005, Jim McNerney became the CEO of Boeing Airlines. So there was a crisis. Boeing had been accused of stealing proprietary documents from Lockheed Martin. They had used that proprietary secret information to get contracts from the government. So that was all happening in mid 2000s. So when he came on board, he was like, we have a new storyline at Boeing. We want to make sure we're built on integrity, that we have trusting partnerships with all of our stakeholders, and everyone knows that Boeing acts with integrity and they can trust us. So he ended up paying $615 million to end 3 years of investigations against Boeing. They had improper behavior. They were stealing the company's leaders, the executives. And so they said, hey, look, he went to Congress, he testified and said, yeah, we're just going to give you $615 million to settle all of this. A lot of people thought he made the wrong call. Dude, you could have fought this. Fight the allegations, you're brand new, let them drag out the investigations. But he said, no, our new storyline is that we are a world-class model of integrity, ethical leadership. And so when he made the call to say, no, we're going to just have to fork over the money because we want people to believe that we are who we say we are now. So again, Dr. Miller, that storyline changed when he came on board as the new CEO. That's an example of using your storyline to say, I'm not just saying we're about integrity, I'm going to show you that we are about ethical leadership in our organization. Here's another example. So we have Harlem Hospital Center. They have triage nurses, of course, everywhere. Here's another example of, there was a triage nurse who ran in, there was a kid who was feverish, and they were trying to mobilize a team to deal with this child who was very, very ill. Then they had an elderly man in cardiac arrest. Oh my gosh. Well, that seemed like, pretty much an intellectual decision. So the fever's not really life-threatening unless it's probably COVID or something else. But then something else happened. There was a pregnant teenage girl who came in with a gunshot wound. The nurse, without hesitation, she pulled the team off of the cardiac arrest patient. She reassigned him to the pregnant girl. The old man died. The girl and her baby survived. What might the storyline be for that hospital, for Harlem Hospital, for that team of triage nurses? Thinking about what we know about storyline, ideas, values, and energy. What might that storyline be that helped her make that call?
Maybe they had value in preserving the most lives as possible. So in this situation, she saved 2 lives instead of 1.
Okay. That could be a value. Good. Who was speaking just now?
Chelsea Broughton
Okay. Hi,
from
Chelsea.
Arlington. Hi.
Anybody else want to add? What else might the storyline be? What other value might they have or idea they might have?
Well, this is Jackie from Arlington. It could be, it didn't really specify how long they had been working on the older man that was in cardiac arrest. So they may have been working 20 minutes and there was potentially not a way for him to really survive. So they saw like a more immediate, something that could be addressed and fixed. So they made that judgment call of, weighing the possible consequences of, okay, do I keep working on this man who has probably been, gone for a couple of minutes versus one who's still alive? And, we have the potential of saving this one.
Very good. Excellent. Thank y'all for sharing that. And you're pretty close to that. That's pretty much it. So, she relied on her medical diagnosis to know which of the two is going to be more severe. But she upheld her values to make the call on who gets the most limited resources. So her storyline led her to value the lives of the 2 young people versus the elderly man who was probably going to die anyway. Right or wrong, that was her judgment. And it reflected a clear set of values that she held to be true, or that was true of the Harlem Hospital. So whereas we may think, oh my God, but every life should be important. You shouldn't value one life or the other. Her medical knowledge and the idea, I know this gentleman's probably not going to survive, but these 2 have a chance, the one who got shot. And so she aligned all of her resources to that. And again, that was a storyline that she used at undergird the decisions that she made as a triage nurse. So now you're going to have some time. Think about your organization, your business owner, consultant, your department, your school. What is the idea that your organization is founded upon? What values drive your organization? What strategy can you use to generate the energy needed to accomplish your organization's goals? You're going to have just some quiet time. We'll start about 5 minutes and see if you all can do that then. I'm going to actually mute and allow you all just to have some quiet space to do that. And then we're going to share a little bit with the larger group how that may sound or look. Any questions before we take some quiet time? All right, I'll set the timer for 5 minutes and you all can go ahead and have your time. Okay, that was 5 minutes. Do you all need about 2 more minutes for that, or are you all good? Give me a thumbs up if you are you good. I'm looking for thumbs up. Okay, sounds good. All right, let's hear from a couple of you who can share. Let's hear your storyline for your organization, department. Jackie, are you ready?
Dr. Brown, it's Jackie in Arlington again. I absolutely love my organization. I'm at Venture, and the idea that our organization is founded upon is reaching at-risk students and helping them find a purpose and a dream and graduate. The values that drive our organization is building relationships. That's the critical piece. Teaching students grit so that they can overcome the obstacles that they face, and still holding them accountable and holding the teachers accountable as well to make sure that they're making the biggest impact that they can. And the strategies that we use to generate energy is we utilize the blended learning model already, and have integrated technology. So that's made it a little bit easier for our students that need something different than the traditional campus. Their schedule needs to be altered a little bit. And also we provide an advisory program. So every student has an advisor who directs them with their grad plan, all the social emotional things that are going on. They call them on a daily basis, especially during the school closure, really reaching out to make sure everything was okay. If they needed resources with our social workers, the admin team calling students and parents to make sure everything was okay. So Venture is a great organization for at-risk kiddos.
Thank you, Jackie, for sharing that. So can you think about, let's talk about the type of student that you take. So have you all ever turned down a student from being enrolling at Venture?
Yes.
Okay, so talk to us about that call and how it aligned or misaligned with your storyline.
There are students that we've had to not allow at different times. There are some students that due to like special education, for example, if they were in like alt curriculum or in like major like PC classes, we didn't have the structures available at the time to provide a lot of the accommodations that that students needed. And so over the years, I think that there was a time that they didn't have special education students, but since I've been there, we've taken quite a few, and we're able to make adjustments to be able to support the students, in a higher capacity.
Very good. So if you had accepted one of those students, that you knew that you didn't have the structure to provide for the student to be successful, you would have made a decision that was against your storyline. That's
Yes.
an example of that. So how that storyline should help you make those calls. That's a great example, Jackie. Can I have one more to share with a larger group? Your storyline for your organization, department, business, school, whatever you want to share.
This is Johanna again, and my storyline, the idea is I'm the World Language Department Chair, and the idea is for our students to creating opportunities for students to be successful in language learning and launching them into advanced placement courses, which most of the time they run away from. They want to be done with level 1 and 2 and just be done with language learning. And so that's the idea. And the value is creating opportunities for teachers to personally develop themselves and build those relationships, having weekly PLCs, co-planning, co-teaching, and data analysis. So we have to know where our kids are every 6 weeks, every third week in the 6-week cycle. And so we sit together, analyze data, and look for areas where we need to grow and where we need to grow. Awesome. And the energy there is that we have built a solid relationship, and so we trust one another. That is why we can make those difficult calls when we have to. And also acknowledging students and teacher growth.
Excellent. Thank you, Johanna. So we don't have time to share everyone's storyline, but I hope that you continue to kind of use that and maybe with other members of your team, your organization, to really spend time building out that storyline. It will help all of you. It'll help you, the people that you support, make good calls as well, and you'll all be aligned with the same type of idea and values and energy that you want for your department, organization, or for your school. Thank y'all for sharing. All right, so here are the 3 phases of the leadership judgment process. Before you make a judgment call, you need to prepare. There's a preparation phase, there's a call phase when you actually make the call, the decision, and then you have to execute it. So these are the 3 phases that you should use when making a judgment call. So when you prepare is when you sense and you frame the issue that's going to demand the call. It's important to align team members so everyone understands why the call is important. This is all the pre-call phase. And then the call, of course, is the moment that you make the decision. Execution is when you execute the call, you implement it. You learn, you adjust along the way. You can't change your call, but you can always change the course of the execution if you collect feedback, if you continue to reframe the reason for the call and go back to execute. And we'll talk about how you can redo parts of that phase if there's kind of a hiccup when you execute. Let's dig a little bit deeper. So this is not the clearest kind of picture, but I thought it was important to share with you all. So this is what a good leader does when they're making a judgment call. The first part is that preparation phase. That's when you sense and you identify kind of, what's happening in the environment. Think about COVID, for example. I'll just go back to the call that I made to have people stay home, for probably for a little bit longer. So it was important that I sense and pick up on signals in the environment. What was I hearing from people, their comfort level, their discomfort level? It was important that I kind of cut through all of the different things I'm hearing from different departments and different in the media and everything else to get to the essence of the issue. That's all preparation. I set clear parameters. So even though you're working from home, the expectation is that you're on the clock when it's time for you to be working, that if you go into the building, you're practicing social distancing. And then I provided context of the reason why this decision was important for our organization and for our department. The other part of the preparation phase is when you identify important people. So I didn't make the call in a vacuum. I did speak to other leaders and that were talking to principals and APs and deans to get an idea of how people were feeling about their current space. I got ideas from them. Is there an idea that we stagger schedules, or do we all stay at home? We just kind of tossed around and brainstormed some ideas. So the preparation phase, those are all things that happen. You pick up kind of cues from what's happening, you frame the call that you have to make and you name it, and then you mobilize people around you to be able to help you get that call executed. And then you see at the very bottom of this, you see the redo part. You see those redo loops down there? When you get to that preparation phase, for example, and you identify the people who you want to help make the decision or make the call, you engage them, you still may have to go back to framing and naming. There still may be some misalignment. There still may be some people who aren't quite sure. So you have to provide context and establish what that shared language and expectation is going to be. Then you actually make the call. It's yes or no. What are you going to do? And then you thoroughly explain the call. Now, when I made the call to say, and this is just a very simple judgment call. Well, it's simple, but not really. When I made the call to say, I still want y'all to work remotely, all the principals in the district, all the APs, all the deans, everyone. I still had to go back and make sure I'm still listening. I'm still collecting information, people's comfort level, when's the right time to bring everybody back. But I made the call. So the call is done. You're staying home. Now, I can't go back and say, okay, wrong call. We're not doing that. What I can say is now let's go back. Let me sense, let me identify where people are, let me frame the challenges that we have, and then go to the execution phase. During the execution phase, I'm involved. I'm still touching base with principals, APs, secretaries. I'm supporting those who are having health challenges or they're afraid to come back for health reasons or other anxieties. And then I set a clear milestone. You guys, right now in the execution phase, we're going to stay home till at least July 21st and work remotely. That was the call. That was during the execution. I said July 21st is going to be our date. I've had to learn. I've had to adjust. So now it is July, what is it? Oh, it's the 18th. Wrong. They're not coming back on the 21st, right? So you go back and you go back in their redo phase, and you can still continue to say, okay, let's another milestone. Let's shoot now for August 3rd. I just made that up. It's not August 3rd. Let's shoot for August 3rd. Then I continue to involve other people in the department to make sure that we're still in alignment, that the execution's going well. And that's just a very simple way to show, how you can move through that phase. And you're gonna get all of this, you guys. So don't worry about having to remember everything. You'll get the whole slide deck as well. So again, the preparation, then you actually do the yes/no call, and then the execution. The important part of this is that redo part. So even if you're going down the track and I'm in execution phase and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't change the call, but I got to go back and I got to support others. I got to make sure everybody understands what we're doing. I got to ask for feedback. You're continuing to do that even in the execution phase. And one of the mistakes a lot of leaders make, and I've made that mistake too, is once I execute the call, it's like, okay, it's done. So that's what we're doing. But you don't continually go back, get feedback, assess the impact of the call that you made, support others as they're executing the call as well. That's a common mistake that we make sometimes when we're overburdened by so much and making so many decisions at one time. Okay. Any thoughts or comments about this particular graphic that I'm sharing with you right now? Thoughts or comments?
I would like to just add that I like that even when you're in the execution phase, you still have to learn and adjust, and there's a redo. And you are here, you made the decision, but you still need to get that feedback. And that goes back to gathering more information. So back to that preparation phase, to me, it seems like you're getting more data, getting more information to make the best judgment call, even though you made a decision. It's a continuous process.
Very good. Thank you, Shaylee. Anybody else want to add something?
It reminds me of the process that that teachers go through with their students in the learning cycle, right? So we teach and then assess, and now let's look based on the data. What do we need to revisit? What needs to be tweaked? So that's what I see when I look at that.
That's very good. Very good alignment and analogy and connection, because you think once a teacher says, okay, I taught it. Okay, I did my part. Now let's go on to the next one. Now, sometimes it happens. We don't want that. We want them constantly reassessing, going back, reteaching to make sure students have, got what they needed and mastered that particular lesson or content. So here's what a poor leader does. Okay, that was a good leader. Great. This is a great judgment call. And then a leader who's not as prepared, they can't read the environment. You ever work for someone who they'll make a call and they don't really care about what you think about it, how it feels, how it impacts you, because this is the right call to make in their mind. They may not acknowledge reality. If I had gone in there and said, no, I said July 21st, so sorry for you, we're coming back on the 21st. The reality is there's a lot of virus still out there. There's a lot of anxiety and fear. And it would not have been a good call, even in the preparation phase. In one of the articles you read, the author talks about the importance of following your gut. You have to, that gut instinct is there for a reason. It's kind of giving you a signal as to if it's a good move or not. And sometimes we listen to our gut and sometimes we don't always listen. If they don't define the goal, or they may remain stuck in an old paradigm in the preparation phase, if they don't correct their previous mistakes, that's also a mistake that a poor leader can make. And then bringing the wrong people on board, not setting clear expectations. Those are things in the preparation phase that can cause the judgment call to not be a good one. During the call phase, when it's time to make a call, you yes or no. Sometimes we dilly-dally. I just like that word. You dilly-dally. You go around the tree, you spend time here, you think about this. We've seen a little bit of that in COVID, to be very candid. And so it's affected the execution of something as simple as wearing a face mask, right? Is it work? Does it not work? Should you? Shouldn't you? And now it's become a big, a statement and a big hoopla. There's a lot of hoopla around it. The execution phase, if you just make the call and say, okay, you guys, We're coming back July 21st and I walk away. I don't check on people. I don't ask if it's working. I don't make sure the safety protocols are being executed. Don't have the resources or materials ready for people to come back into the school. That's not good execution. And then if I don't measure the outcome of the call, if I don't respond to people who are backlashing and resisting, you know, that's also a poor call during the execution phase. So I've showed you the good leader and the poor leader. And now we're going to actually unpack a time that you made a bad call, because we're all friends and we can do that, right? I'm going to put you at a breakout room. I'm not going to give you 10 minutes for time. We're going to probably do between 6 and 7 minutes. I'm going to give you a minute to think about a time that you may have made a bad call. May not have been the best call. What phase did you trip on? Okay. And what would you do different next time? What phase did you trip on? What would you do different next time? Preparation, the call, or execution? Give y'all 60 seconds before we break you out. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and break you out into your rooms, and we're going to try 6 minutes, you guys, in the interest of time. Okay, 6 minutes. Welcome back. Hi, Miss Angela. Good to see your face right there.
Hi.
Hello, Miss Moore. Miss Majors, where are you? What's your district? Are you
I am in Grand Prairie.
in Grand Prairie? What do you do?
I am the elementary math and science facilitator.
Fantastic. Great. And then we have Miss Mackey from Plano. These are the 5 that are on my screen right now. So I'm happy to see you. Miss Moore from Workman. Good to see you. All right. We have a couple more minutes or seconds. We'll wait for people to join, and we're going to have maybe 1 or 2 of you share your call, and then just briefly what phase you trip up on, and then what would you do different next time. Think about who might want to share. Maybe someone we haven't heard from yet. When you're ready, we're ready for you.
I'll share. My name is Deja Boateng. I am in Arlington ISD.
Hi, Miss Deja.
And I'm a dean of instruction. And so I'm just going to reflect on my experience as a dean when I first came in. I have a secondary background, but now I'm in elementary. And so coming from secondary, we have daily PLCs. In elementary school, you do not. And so I was just telling my group that I tripped up because I didn't get any data based on the PLC, how they ran their PLCs, how often they had them. I just really spoke to the administrative team and found out like they're not used to PLCing regularly and those things. So I was never consistent in the way that I executed the PLC. I didn't really get a lot of feedback, and they just proved to be very ineffective because of a lack of consistency, and then a lack of just really not just defining the ultimate goal, but finding a cohort of people who can give me feedback, who are invested in the process to transform the trajectory for students and those things. So that was a judgment call that I was just making decisions without being informed with a lack of preparation.
So definitely the preparation phase. And then if you go back to those 4 types of knowledge that I shared with you earlier today, let's look back at those 4 phases.
It was the organizational and the context.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. I didn't have to go all the way there. Organizational and contextual would help you have made a better call. Thank you for sharing, Deja. Let's hear from one more who we haven't heard from yet.
I'll share. I was sharing with my group that as a emerging leader in my cohort, I was tasked with the English 8 team. And as a music teacher, that was already amazing because it was completely different wheelhouse. So implementing the DDI process for them was also pretty interesting because I didn't really lead with the value to them. And instead of leading with the value to them, I kind of just said, hey, here's where we're going to start. And it really got a lot of pushback because they didn't see that value. So taking that time to prepare in that way, because once I went back and explained the value and we started the process, they were actually able to see those benefits in action, and it became a lot easier for them to implement versus just, hey, this is what we're going to do. Let's see what we need to do to get it done.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing. Very good. Very good. So I talked to you about that redo loop. And so just a reminder that redo loop is important. And one of the reasons why is it gives you an opportunity at the end of the preparation phase and the beginning of the call phase to really get you another chance to mobilize people on your team, to align the organization if you may have made a mistake, like Deja and Shanna both mentioned a couple of minutes ago. And so sometimes, as I mentioned, we don't take advantage of that opportunity, but that really could make all the difference. Again, the call may not change, but you still may be able to energize stakeholders, reframe, set clear parameters, set goalposts, et cetera, during that redo phase. And that's why it's so important. So let's think about the COVID response, right? As it relates to schools, or even as it relates to your organization or your department or business. So when you think about that COVID response, especially as a crisis situation, we had not experienced anything like that before. However, again, if you use the context of your storyline, you would have been able to make a call without it being, even though you've never experienced it before, you're still using the same process, the same ideas and values and energy to be able to make the right call. So when you think about the COVID response that you've experienced personally, whether it's your school, your district, your business, I want you to think about where could you or your organization have engaged in maybe the redo loop to figure out how they could better respond to that particular crisis. Think about just your organization's response, or our government. If you want to go there, it's fine. Where may they have been a need to redo? Who'd like to share their thoughts?
I guess right now, a lot of districts, we're in the preparation phase. And in terms of how will the virtual learning environment look. And so really taking the time to set some clear parameters so that our teachers and our families know exactly what to expect. And so, because it will be different from in March when we were in an emergency type situation. So just making sure we're reframing it like, no, this isn't like emergency school with no grades. This is real school, and making sure that we're very clear about that with especially the teachers, I think.
Yeah, that's a great point. We're having the same conversations in Arlington as well. Anybody else want to share your thoughts?
Hi, yes, my name is Demarian Hall with Dallas ISD. I guess since I am a teacher as well as the reading coach, I'm feeling like our district itself is struggling with making a call. We're kind of just sitting and making it, and we've seen where the Best Southwest has just gone ahead and said, look, there will be no in-person until after September 7th. I feel like Dallas ISD, they just won't say anything. So to me, they're not making a call yet. They're not doing anything. However, like the young lady who just spoke just now, they're in the preparation stage. To me, it's difficult for us to even make preparations being teachers. So we know that we want to do virtual learning, but I would just love the opportunity to say, okay, we use Class Dojo before school let out, and we use All In Learning. Let's solidify something for our campus so that we can know what direction we want to go in. But I feel like with no idea for what's going on, we can't even prepare as a school or prepare as a department. So that call phase is not happening yet in Dallas, and it's holding up everyone else.
So you brought up a very important point. So the decision at the district level, when they go making the call, it's going to allow you at the campus level to be able to now go to what's our preparation phase, what's the call that we're going to make for our campus, and then how are we going to execute the call that was made at the district level. So that's kind of interesting that you talk about. There's like a domino effect there that you have to really be able to lean into to be able to go through all those phases at your organization. So thank you, Ms. Hall, for sharing that. So again, I'm sorry?
I was gonna just say something to what Demarian Hall said. Yes. And as a department, I've told my team already, we don't know what's happening right now, but we need to be prepared anyways. So whether we're gonna be traditional classroom or virtual, we need to be prepared both ways. And you can still hit all the 4 C's in virtual classroom learning. So now that we know that we might go either way as leaders or as teachers, it's better we get ourselves prepared ahead of time so we don't fall in crisis when decision is made or when the call is made.
Very good. Thank you, Johanna, for adding that. Yep, absolutely right. So we're going to take some time now. I actually sent you all an email, and I'm wondering, I think we have a little time to do this. I sent everyone an email. So if you could, when you go into your breakout, I'm going to ask you to choose one of the case studies. There are 3 in the document. I also included the screenshot of what I shared with you in terms of the 3 phases of the call. And I want you to read the case study, and I want you to determine why the call was ineffective and what could the leader have done differently considering those phases. So identifying the one phase where the leader could have made a different decision and to execute the call a little bit better. So it's going to take a little bit of time. If you've not gone to your email, I'm going to ask you to do that. And if either one person can read it out loud, I think you should be able to share your screen in your small group. I think I enabled that. But if I didn't, if you all have access to that in your email, the email that you use to register for the webinar. Okay. So we're going to have probably about 8 minutes for this. That'll give you time to transition, get the case study up, look at the graphic, and then we'll come back to our larger group. Okay. Any questions about that? No questions? All right, so I'm going to break you out, check your email, and we'll see you in about 8 minutes. How are you, Miss Moore?
I was like, I heard, how are you? I'm well. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. You're the only person on my screen right now. So I was like, hey.
Hey, look at me.
Look at you. Okay, now I see some more folks. Hi, Linda Kim. Thanks for joining us again today. Good to see you. All right, so we just have about 10 minutes left. So let's take a couple of minutes to hear thoughts. You want to share kind of briefly, kind of talk about the phase that in your case study, the leader might have erred. We'd like to share with a larger group.
This is Angela Eaton from Arlington ISD. Our group chose case study number 3 mainly because it involved food. But we looked at the fact that the leader wanted to make some changes without considering their people. And we said that the downfall was in phase, not in preparation phase, because he didn't bring along the people and really change their identity. And so we have to be very careful when we are considering changes, that we bring the people with us and that they have a say in what's going on. And so that was the biggest component there. He was changing their identity. They had already had a brand. They already enjoyed the things that each individual company had. And so he just upset their world.
So even in that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to chime in real quick. Catherine Claiborne from Arlington. We also chose number 3, and we talked about the same thing, Dr. Eaton, where he didn't bring his team on board, but then we kind of got on a little side conversation where, does anyone really want fried chicken, tacos, and pizza out of the same place? So I think you also need to consider like your consumers, you know, which would be our students, our families, our community. Do they want that? Because Chick-fil-A does so well, and they just do chicken. So maybe you need to just listen to not only your members on your team, your employees, but also your consumers, your clients. And do they want you to do everything okay, or do they want you to do one thing really well?
Very good.
I
You
agree,
guys want to add
Catherine.
anything to that?
They didn't feel valued. When they took their identity away, they were like, hey, well, what about me? Stop comparing me to McDonald's. And they took the value away. I'm sorry, Rochelle from Arlington. But it took the value. We had fun with this, by the way, because it was talking about food. And now we were realizing why we don't see a lot of those chains because of that. But we just feel like they didn't feel valued. They're like, well, why are you taking our identity away? So it's a great article.
Very good. Thank you, Rochelle. And with that, you guys, you think about that leader could have taken advantage of a redo loop. So where could the leader take an advantage of the redo loop? What could he have done different?
Dr. Brown, this is Lee. So I think number 1, there was a piece on the execution phase about the responding to resistance in the organization. So I think kind of like doing the survey ahead of time and explaining why the leader even had the thought process to do this. And then maybe the things that like Rochelle had said about, if people had a concern about, well, we're going to lose our identity and we're going to be like the pizza fish king and not the pizza king, kind of thing. And so maybe with those responses, the shift either could have refined something even more on the marketing side, or it could have gone in a completely different direction that either might have been more profitable or could have extended the people in the organization to come on board quicker so that the leader could continue the progress quicker.
Excellent. Thank you, Lee. Let's hear from someone who did either case study 1 or 2.
I can share. Hi, this is Dr. Brown. This is Julieta Rodriguez from Arlington ISD. Our group had a great discussion on the case study number 2, where it talked about a CEO trying to save costs and then it resulted in an oil spill in the Gulf, or I don't know where it was actually, but so we were talking about it, and we mentioned how as leaders we're we're in charge of a lot of lives still. Like we have children in our hands, and we don't think about it that on a day-to-day basis something can result like in an injury. So that's something that we were really brainstorming, thinking, why does it have to take a death for somebody to think of the consequences? So as a leader, we're thinking of being proactive. So thinking of all of the bad things that could happen. And it's not just to say, oh, we're thinking of negativity, but we're thinking of what could potentially happen. And so in that case, 15 workers ended up being killed because of the lack of day-to-day maintenance. So that just put up a really good eye-opener for us as educators in thinking of going back and seeing, tending to those needs that are small so that it won't be something big at the end.
Very good. Thank you.
There's a good case study.
Excellent. And let's hear from case study 2. Anybody choose that one? Is it 1 and 3 for everybody?
Yes. We talked about whenever they got ready to combine the brands, they had a lot of drawback on that. And what we were talking about in respect to the preparation stage is this, that he could have gone a little bit deeper to probe a little bit deeper into why he wanted the volume to increase in the sales. Coming prepared with data of where they are right now. What is the overall goal of where they want to be in the future? And then just determine, together, where he has all the voices involved, how can we get there? How is this going to benefit everyone? So data can speak a lot. I know a lot of times it's not always looked at as a good thing, because people say it's just a number, but it keeps the emotions from flaring and conversations from getting out of control. A lot of times when you can just analyze it and look at it together. And then we also talked about on the front end, preparing for questions before you actually go in that may come from the different groups of people that you would be speaking to. So just being prepared when you go in there with information that would provide a way for people to be involved with what they're doing in their decision making.
I gave the wrong case study. So we've already talked about oil spill. That's good. We only have 2 minutes left, so we'll go ahead and just move on. So thank y'all for your contributions to that. So we did our case studies. And so basically, you guys, just to kind of summarize this, is that kind of our biography as a leader is really grounded in the type of judgment calls we make, our chronicle of judgment calls. And so I think it's important, as I mentioned at the very beginning, that when we make the right call, people remember the outcome. We make the wrong call, people remember the outcome. So it's very important that we are on the right side of that, so people can look at us and see us as leaders who are making the right calls. So this was a kind of a crash course in this. If you are interested, of course, in learning more, I referenced the resources that I used at the very beginning. You have a couple of articles. You will get a copy of this webinar along with the PowerPoint. And as I mentioned last time, if you do want to use the materials, I'm happy to share that with you. And I don't mind you sharing, as long as that you just ask permission first before you share this with others. So just a couple of things before we close out. First is I'm going to send you a survey immediately following this call today. We do want your feedback, of course, to plan for our third session. So it'll take you 3 to 4 minutes to do that. So please take care of that. And our last session is on August 15th. And so we've talked about the principles of change management. We talked about making good judgment calls. And now we're going to talk about how do you make the change stick once you've executed that change. You'll be sent the pre-reading with the registration link at least 1 week in advance. for some reason, some people aren't receiving this. So if you don't get this about a week before, by the 7th or 8th, reach out to me and make sure that I can get that to you so you don't get it the day of the session or the day before. You'll have time to do your pre-reading. All right. Any last minute comments or thoughts before we close out today? It's 12 o'clock. I told you it goes by fast.
It does. I truly value these sessions. This is Chandra Boone. I'm out of Arkansas, but have had experience within the Dallas-Fort Worth area as well as Houston, Texas area. And this has truly just been a monumental and truly relevant and necessary session for me to engage in, just to ensure that I'm continuing to do the things that I need to do as a leader, and then also supporting others as they aspire to do some of the similar things as well. So I thank you so much for your time with us.
Thank you, Chandra. Appreciate that. Anybody else before we close out today?
I just want to say,
oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, it's just Dr. Miller from Broward County, Florida. I just want to say I really appreciate the storylines, because actually for me, it adds a little bit more clarity to my decision making. So I think I'm going to be, using storylines from this point on. I think that's a great tool, and I had fun actually trying to put together, the one for one of the departments I oversee. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Dr. Miller. I'm glad you're joining us from Florida. All right, anybody else? I think, Deja, were you going to say something before we finish?
I just wanted to highlight that this session, not only was it just extremely valuable, but it just makes me consider, when making those judgment calls and making those decisions, what am I willing to sacrifice if I don't make the right one? So being extremely intentional in the preparation phase and getting feedback. So just thank you for highlighting that, because during this time we have to be super intentional. So it just makes me think, am I willing to sacrifice lives, whether it's teachers or students, when whatever we decide? Am I willing to sacrifice education because I won't make the tough call to set clear expectations when it comes to instruction? So thank you, thank you, thank you.
That's awesome, Deja. Thank you. That's a great way to close out today. All right, you guys. Well, enjoy the rest of your Saturday as y'all are making plans, many of you, to go back into the business or back into school. I just continue to keep everyone lifted in prayer. This is a very tough time for everyone, and we're all tasked with